criticizes
and the human side of this drama. For the most comprehensive coverage of America's new war, you can depend on CNN.
To learn more about upcoming guests, you can log on to our website at cnn.com/Larry King. Tomorrow night, Senator Tom Daschle for a major appearance on this program. We hope you look forward to checking in with us. We always look forward to checking into this special report, hosted by my man, Aaron Brown. Aaron in New York.
Thank you, Larry, and good evening again, everybody. Out in the Bronx tonight, the president threw out the first pitch of Game 3 of the World Series. Nice symbolism in a couple of ways. And in our part of town, Michael Jordan opened the NBA season against the New York Knicks. Two huge sports stories. At the risk of blowing my cover, I like a good ball game, and I love to read the sports page each morning, and I don't think I've done either in 7 weeks. Now, I understand this tragedy has been somewhat more consuming to me than most people. I live in New York and I deal with this 19 hours a day. But on this, I do not think I'm alone. The games don't seem to matter as much as they used to, and even when they do matter, they seem to matter for different reasons beyond who won or lost. So little seems mindless or routine anymore. Not a ball game, not the sports page, not trick-or-treating, and especially not kissing a child goodnight. It's been 7 weeks today. To the news we go. Secretary Rumsfeld said today there are some U.S. ground forces on the ground in Afghanistan. 2 weeks ago he threw a fit because something just about like that was reported. So why the change? And as we said, the president made a pitch of his own tonight. Life goes on. So does the World Series. But it's not as it was. The vice president was out somewhere. We don't know where. He's out of sight again after last night's terror alert. And the government now knows you don't have to work in a newsroom or a mailroom to get anthrax. Are people getting it from just picking up their mail? Health officials are now taking that question very seriously, and we shall too tonight. Other questions on the table. How is the war really going? We'll talk about the health of people working ground zero, and we'll debunk a few rumors along the way. Before we do any of that, we'll get the headlines, and we begin with our senior White House correspondent, John King, on the president's visit to the ballpark. John?
Well, Aaron, that visit comes at the end of another very tough, challenging day for the president. He learned more today about just how much trouble the economy is in. Consumer confidence at a 7.5-year low. A difficult breakfast meeting in the morning with the bipartisan leadership of Congress at a time an increasingly partisan fight over just how to improve airline security and what to do about that struggling economy. New questions today about that new terrorism alert and, as you noted, the military strategy overseas. Still, the president at a ball game tonight, part of his effort to show the American people, even in the toughest of times, you have to have a little fun.
John, back with you in a bit. On the anthrax front, and how strange does that sound? New developments today. Eileen O'Connor has been working the story. Eileen?
Well, Aaron, inhalation anthrax, where investigators thought it would not be found, undermining theories, sending scientists back to the drawing board. And it's raising new concerns about the possible breadth of contamination and the possible existence of more letters.
Eileen, thank you. Back with you shortly, too. Northern Afghanistan now, the latest on the ground there. CNN's Satindra Binder reporting this evening.
Aaron, for the first time since this bombing campaign began, U.S. planes have opened up a new front. They've been bombing Taliban positions along the Afghanistan-Tajikistan border. But so far, no change on the ground. The military position remains the same. Northern Alliance troops have not been able to advance towards Taliban positions. Now, however, Northern Alliance commanders are saying they'll soon make a major push towards the northern and strategic city of Mazar-e-Sharif. Aaron.
We'll be back with all of you shortly. We begin tonight, though, with a mixed message. While Vice President Cheney hunkers down at some secret location, the president was out at Yankee Stadium enjoying, we hope, Game 3 of the World Series. This again points out the great dilemma, both for the government and the rest of the country, too. Go about your normal business, but remember there's a suspicion of another terrorist attack within the next days or week. Back to the White House and senior correspondent John King. John?
Aaron, the president opened the baseball season in Milwaukee. He threw a pitch low and in the dirt. Tonight, a strike, at least by a politician's scorekeeping. He threw the ball straight across home plate at Yankee Stadium. Moments after passing through the dugout and on his way through, he passed on the ramp a sign quoting General Douglas MacArthur. That quote, "There is no substitute for victory." For a president, this is part of the routine, part of the effort to convince the country life goes on. But tradition comes with extra security this year. A city and a country stung by terrorism just weeks ago on notice it could be about to happen again. Airspace over Yankee Stadium was put off limits because of the new terrorism alert. The government also ordered new flight restrictions near nuclear power plants and other nuclear facilities, and promised additional measures at airports and other major transportation centers.
There will be higher levels of surveillance and more stringent searches.
The stepped-up security came after a new alert based on U.S. intelligence reports indicating a high risk of more terrorist attacks in the next week or so.
You can fairly assume that the experts view this tied in, this information somehow related to al-Qaeda or bin Laden, else we wouldn't have ramped it up.
But the administration said the intelligence did not indicate specific targets or the types of strikes being planned. And some in Congress complained that such a warning only serves to scare people.
Well, it's vague, it's nonspecific, it says everybody beware, but you don't know what to beware of, or you don't know how to protect yourself, and that's the problem.
The president told high school students they need to be alert but calm.
Our commitment to freedom has always made us a target of tyranny and intolerance. We must never flinch in the face of adversity, and we won't.
Heading to the ball game was the president's way of proving he can go about his routine despite the new alert. But that new alert does mean new security precautions around the president and here at the White House as well, including that decision today to keep the president and the vice president apart and to move Mr. Cheney once again to a secure, undisclosed location. Aaron.
John, thanks. Senior White House correspondent John King this evening. Now on to anthrax. The cases are spreading. They're spreading beyond the media, beyond the government, and beyond the post offices. And no, we still don't know how much farther this is going to go or even how it's getting in some of these places. Once again, CNN's Eileen O'Connor joins us from Washington. Eileen, good evening.
All of that very perplexing, Aaron. The Secretary of Health and Human Services says investigators simply do not know who is sending anthrax through the mail, and no one knows if there will be more.
Investigators are perplexed. How did a woman who worked primarily in a storeroom of this eye, ear, nose, and throat hospital in New York, where she had no special contact with the mail, come down with inhalation anthrax?
There's no question there's the possibility she got it somewhere else.
She's in critical condition at another hospital. The hospital where she worked has tested clean so far, but anyone who's been there lately will be tested and treated, and some questioned.
An exposure of over an hour since October 11th, and they will be treated.
Another mystery, a case of skin anthrax in an office building in the same town in New Jersey where anthrax-laced letters were postmarked. As a precaution, investigators checked several offices in that building, including a field office of a congressman. The infected woman is doing fine, but again, she's not a postal worker. How did she get it? Her co-workers say they doubt she got it at the office.
The fact that I've been in that office for 3 weeks and or whatever the length of time it's been since she was infected, and I haven't contracted anything, I'm not overly concerned.
After weeks of saying the mail is safe, health officials are now not ruling out the possibility she contracted the disease at home.
That is being intensively investigated right now.
In addition to these new cases of anthrax and seemingly unrelated people, more post offices down the distribution chain from contaminated mail handling facilities are also showing traces.
Investigators say it's possible the contamination came from the anthrax-laced substance in the letter sent to Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle. But whether there was enough actual anthrax spores to cause so many infections is unknown.
We haven't been told any figure. I don't think it's possible to do a spore count. We were told a couple of grams.
Investigative sources say the Daschle letter appeared stained, raising the possibility of leakage. More likely with that letter, they say, than with the others sent.
That paper was more porous than the previous paper and allowed the anthrax to move through the paper.
But given 2 inhalation cases in places which never handled the Daschle letter, some investigators believe there must be other letters among mail already impounded.
We're making plans to go through that piece by piece.
But not, they say, before it's thoroughly sanitized.
The postal inspector says the one thing this scare has done is identify a soft spot. To solve it, sanitize all the mail now and in the future. But how exactly without damaging some things that are sent through the Postal Service? That's still an open question. Aaron?
And how long would it actually take to get the equipment in place to sanitize all that mail?
Again, another open question. It's going to be a long time. They do not have that equipment even readily available. It would actually have to be produced, and we're talking about thousands of machines to prevent mail from having to be shipped to other facilities. But they do say they are going to be ordering 8 machines to put at regional post offices in the very near future. Aaron?
Eileen, thanks. Eileen O'Connor in Washington on anthrax. The fact is there aren't many answers there tonight. They're just new sets of facts cropping up. Coming up, tough questions for the Pentagon, too. Is there actually real progress in America's new war? We'll be right back.
Impala. My dad had one of these.
Really? Wow.
I just have some very nice memories from that car.
Did his have the smoke lenses in the front, rear deck spoiler, 200 horsepower, V6 engine,
16-inch aluminum wheel. Well, I just love that they brought the Impala back.
Whenever you call me. Chevy Impala LS. The feeling never fades. You're gonna love it.
This is my car.
Impala. We'll be there.
We've got him now, partner. I call for backup. I put out an APB. Oh, and later, let's talk about tax smart strategies for rolling over your 401k.
Wouldn't it be great if the person you trust most was your broker?
That's all it takes.
At Schwab, when we help you with the details of your 401k rollover, you get advice that's objective, uncomplicated, and not driven by commission. To roll over your 401k, call 1-800-4-SCHWAB.
That way, you'll avoid future tax penalties.
As America strikes back, CNN is there first. The first to take you inside the war zone, to hear from military and regional leaders, and to bring you reactions from around the world. To see it first, you can depend on CNN.
New terrorism warnings put America on high alert. And how big can the anthrax threat get? Secretary Tommy Thompson, the director of the CDC, and others. Tonight, midnight Eastern on Larry King Live. You can depend on CNN.
There's a notion out there tonight that bears a closer look from us. It might be right, it could be wrong, but it is out there, it's growing, and it goes something like this. The war in Afghanistan can't be won the way it's being fought. Too many self-imposed limits, too much reliance on pinprick airstrikes, and too little of what one columnist called today scaring the living hell out of the enemy. Fair criticism 3 weeks into a war? Not for us to say, but a fair question is being asked on editorial pages and around dinner tables and at the Pentagon. Here's Jamie McIntyre.
The Pentagon says it's now concentrating 80% of its firepower against frontline Taliban forces, but says the shift is not a sign of frustration and a lack of progress, but rather part of a methodically planned military campaign that is just 3 weeks young.
In my view, it is not at all stalemated. I believe that we're on the timeline that we established, which essentially is the timeline that we exercise at our initiative.
The Pentagon has now acknowledged publicly that pinpoint strikes against Taliban targets in the north have been more effective in recent days because a handful of U.S. Special Forces working with the opposition are calling in strikes and using lasers to mark targets. But with fewer than 100 planes a day attacking the Taliban, critics say the U.S. could easily intensify the pressure by carpet-bombing troop concentrations or putting in more special forces to better direct attacks.
Were anyone to make that suggestion, it would reflect a lack of understanding or knowledge as to the effort we've been putting into it. It is not easily done.
Rumsfeld acknowledges the war in Afghanistan is constrained, but insists the constraints are practical, not political.
In any conflict, there are constraints. And there are constraints because weapons have only so much precision. There are constraints because there are some things you simply don't want to do, and you make a conscious decision not to do them.
And to critics who argue the Pentagon needs to send ground troops in to root out the al-Qaeda network and its Taliban backers, both the United States and its closest ally, Great Britain, say that may yet happen.
The United States of America has certainly not ruled out the use of ground troops.
Mr. Who? Nor have we. The Pentagon says in 3 weeks it has established air superiority over Afghanistan, eliminated much of the Taliban's military equipment, cut off its resupply lines, and made it possible for U.S. forces to maneuver on the ground.
We know we're doing the right thing. We're doing it in the best way that we know how. We're adapting as we go along. We're confident that we're making progress, and we are going to win.
Both the United States and Britain say it would not make military sense to ease up on the aerial assault for the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which begins in mid-November. That, they say, would simply give the Taliban a chance to regroup. And Pakistan's president has eased up on his call for a bombing pause, saying simply he hopes the U.S. can achieve its military objectives by then. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, the Pentagon.
Well, you need both hands to count the number of times the president and the Pentagon use some form of the word patience today. And it's not just directed at the American public and the media, it's also directed at anti-Taliban forces with the Northern Alliance. They have been vocally frustrated with the pace of the U.S. campaign against the frontline Taliban forces. They are anxious to move on key cities, including Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif, and they are unable to do so. So where do they stand tonight? That's what Satinder Bindra has been working on. He joins us from northern Afghanistan, where it is early morning, so good morning to you.
Good morning, Aaron. What we are seeing here for the last 2 days is a mortar attack and artillery strikes by Northern Alliance forces. This after, for the first time since this bombing campaign began, U.S. planes have been targeting Taliban positions along the Tajik-Afghanistan border. But despite these attacks from the air and despite these mortar and artillery attacks that I've been talking about, Northern Alliance troops are still stuck. They still have not been able to make much headway against Taliban positions. For more than 2 weeks, Northern Alliance forces have been pressing hard to capture the strategic northern town of Mazar-e-Sharif. So far, all their attacks have been repulsed. Local Taliban officials even claimed 5 Northern Alliance commanders had been captured and hanged. Those claims were denied within hours by a senior Taliban minister. While not confirming or denying those reports, the Northern Alliance says earlier this week its forces killed 35 Taliban fighters and captured another 140. It's impossible to independently verify claims from either side. What is clear, though, is the fighting in the north seems to be veering towards a stalemate. On many northern battlefronts, it's evident alliance forces are poorly equipped, and commanders admit they may not be able to make much headway against entrenched Taliban forces until Russia delivers on a promise to provide 40 tanks pulled out of storage and 100 armored vehicles.
Well, Afghanistan had a history of a long war with the Soviet Union, but today we are clearly no longer dealing with the Soviet Union. Now we are dealing with the Russian Federation, and their politics clearly differs from that of the Soviet Union.
Reports from Moscow indicate Russia could deliver up to $45 million worth of hardware, perhaps by the end of the year. Northern Alliance commanders say the tanks will definitely boost morale and increase their military capability. But with winter setting in and many mountain passes expected to close soon, the tanks, if they're delivered, may not be able to make it to the Kabul front until next spring. Regardless of the arrival of Russian armor, the alliance says the fighting will go on, perhaps even during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
As I mentioned, traditionally the Taliban have not refrained from unleashing terror on people for any religious circumstance or holiday. So, of course, if there are going to be any attacks, we will do everything to defend our people.
Now, over the next few weeks, Aaron, Northern Alliance forces expect the United States to keep up a sustained bombing campaign. They also expect more cooperation and collaboration between Northern Alliance commanders on the ground and the U.S. military. They're also asking for more pinpointed and more accurate strikes against Taliban positions. Aaron, there's some anger here that U.S. strikes have over the past few days caused civilian casualties. Back to you.
Thank you, Satinder. Very nice job out there today. Thank you very much. You know, we say a lot that one picture can tell a great story. And while the United States is bombing with these high-tech bombs, our country's allies on the ground are riding horses. South now to bomb-ravaged Kandahar, Taliban-controlled territory. Still, the latest on the ground. Nick Robertson on the video phone in Kandahar this morning. Nick?
Aaron, there was a large explosion here about 3.5 hours ago. It rattled the windows on this building. It was still nighttime. It was difficult to see where that bomb had gone off. A few hours earlier, we'd heard jet fighters flying in the air and heard explosions and seen flashes towards the northern horizon from here. Also, overnight, we could hear what it sounded like C-130 transport aircraft flying quite low in this area, quite a different sound to the fighter aircraft. Now, this morning, Syed Tayyab Agha, a principal spokesman for the Taliban leader, Mullah Mohammed Omar, also his secretary, came here to this compound where 26 foreign journalists had been brought into Kandahar, and he told us that 2 civilian houses had been hit in the city overnight. He said there were some civilian casualties, including, he said, a medical team in one of those houses. He also said that 2 cars were damaged in this city as well. Now, we're still just on the outskirts of Kandahar, but what we saw last night and what we see from this city this morning, looking at the traffic on the roads, it appears as if it's a place where there is business as usual. There are transport trucks going up and down the roads, including fuel trucks. And we are told by these Taliban leaders we will be able to go into the city, Kandahar, behind me, in a little while, Aaron, and we're told we will be able to see these houses and make visits to places that we request. Aaron?
And Nick, just for the record, let's establish what the restrictions, if any, are so far as quickly as you can.
Aaron, we're held just outside the city in a compound. It's guarded. We have Taliban spokesmen with us, and we understand they will be escorting us today. That's the principle of their operation here. It sounds very much like the trip we made 2 weeks ago with the Taliban, where they tell us where they'll take us. We can suggest sites. They say they'll take us there. Aaron?
Nick, thanks. Nick Robertson, just outside of Kandahar. You'll get a good look at the city today, we hope, and later on tomorrow here. We'll know more. Thank you, Nick. Coming up, preparing for terror, some kind of terror. One local police official said today, you have to assume anything can happen. How do you prepare for anything? We'll look at the struggle across the country, local communities in a moment.
You're watching Special Report with Aaron Brown. Next, inside opinion and analysis on Greenfield at Large. Depend on CNN.
Want to save thousands on a brand new boat and not make a payment for 6 months? Cash in on the 2001 model clearance at Hayden Island Yacht Center and save big.
There's one brand of truck strong enough to carry the American spirit, Chevrolet. And right now, get 0% financing on every new truck we build. Silverado, Tahoe, Suburban, Trailblazer. The trucks behind a country that never quits. And you can own one, interest-free. Keep America rolling. See your local Chevy dealer today. As America strikes back, depend on CNN.
When the security warning went out yesterday, it went to 18,000 communities across the country, a few of them large, but most small, and nearly all of them in uncharted waters tonight, improvising their way through America's new war. CNN's Thelma Gutierrez visited 3 of those cities.
Burbank, California, Delray Beach, Florida, Bloomington, Minnesota. Small communities across America, not always visible on the radar screen when it comes to talk of terror attacks in high-profile places. At least not until this announcement was made.
There may be additional terrorist attacks within the United States and against United States interests over the next week. The administration views this information as credible.
Credible, perhaps, but the administration says it doesn't have any information as to the types of attacks or even any specific targets, and that puts everyone in a vulnerable position, even folks who live in small towns.
In a way, I kind of wish we didn't hear about it because we all know something's going to happen, we just don't know what. And so I think that's the scariest part.
I think this warning here came out in a good way because it is showing that we're not trying to hide things from the public.
In Burbank, home of some of the biggest movie studios, the police department has been on heightened alert since 9/11. City leaders say the new warning may be unnerving, but so far they have no new plans of action.
If we were to receive some type of a specific threat about anything, then we would react appropriately to that at that time and may take additional steps. But at this point, because this is a very general type of alert, we are just maintaining a very high vigilance within the city.
In the quiet coastal town of Delray Beach, Florida,
we are not aware of a specific type of threat, so we are no more heightened than we were yesterday or the day before.
The focus of concern, even in small towns, is where big crowds gather. In Bloomington, Minnesota, at the largest mall in the country, Mall of America, the annual Halloween trick-or-treat event will go on as scheduled. Thousands of children will collect candy from vendors. More than 130 officers will patrol the area, and security will eye the crowd from 130 closed-circuit TV surveillance cameras. At Universal Studios outside of Los Angeles, security is tight as ever. Cars are subject to search. Anyone entering the park must first go through metal detectors. Cement barriers and iron gates now surround the property.
It's scary, and you try to go on with your life. I have grandchildren. I'm worried about them.
If you have to worry about, every time somebody says something bad might happen, I worry more about crossing the street and getting hit by a car than I do planes falling out of the sky.
The gates and barriers and security checks in public places are the result of September 11th. Now, with each new warning, Americans wonder if it'll be enough. Thelma Gutierrez, CNN, Los Angeles.
When we talk about the anthrax story, we keep hearing about New York and New Jersey and Washington. If you're in one of those areas, it's easy to get tunnel vision about how the rest of the country is dealing with this. So perhaps this is a reality check as much for us as it is for you. We brought together tonight an editor and a reporter from local newspapers around the country to get a sense of what they're writing about and what their readers are saying. James O'Shea is the managing editor of a terrific newspaper, the Chicago Tribune, and Lauren Marco is a reporter for the Charlotte Observer, good newspaper too. Good evening to both of you. Lauren, do you know what your front page is tomorrow?
I can tell you what our front page looks like. 4 out of our 5 stories are about terror, either directly or indirectly. I can run down them very quickly.
Well, actually what I'd be more interested in knowing is how common that has been. Is if you took 5 major stories on the front page every day for the last 7 weeks, would 4 out of 5 been the terror?
That's the norm. That's par for the course. It was 5 out of 5 for the first few weeks after September 11th, but in the past 2 weeks or so, we've allowed 1 terror-free story. Tomorrow that's Michael Jordan, but usually only 1 a day on the front page.
And Mr. O'Shea, Michael Jordan make the front page of the Chicago Tribune tomorrow morning?
There's a reefer and a picture, but not a story. No.
Okay. What will be on the front page?
Well, generally we have it's pretty much a war on terror front page with an attack story detailing the military developments, an anthrax story. We have a story about the security threat issued by Mr. Ashcroft, a story about the president attending the ball game in New York, the World Series. Then we have a story on an economic story that is somewhat related to the terrorist attacks, and then a local story about how they are trying to teach kids about these complex issues in our schools.
Are your readers saying to you enough, too much about right? What are you hearing?
Well, basically, we're hearing that people are very interested in this and they're very concerned about these issues, and they want us to cover the story. If our numbers are any indication, our circulation is up, and people want to read about this campaign, about this war, about the fears and all of the other implications of this new way of life for us.
And Ms. Marco, run down your front page for me. We just got a taste of the numbers. Give me an idea of the substance here.
The lead story is anthrax, the woman in New York who's so severely ill. We also have a story, the latest from Afghanistan, a story about aviation and how planes can't fly within 11 miles of nuclear plants. We've got a significant local angle with that story because we in Charlotte are within 15 miles of 2 nuclear plants, one in North Carolina and one in South Carolina. Then we've got a story, and from the headline it might not seem to be terror related, but it is. It's about more stringent requirements for getting a driver's license in North Carolina. It used to be very easy. It's going to be harder now. Some of your viewers may remember that 4 of the hijackers who flew the plane into the Pentagon had Virginia licenses, and they were not residents of Virginia. And then again, our 5th story is about Michael Jordan playing at the Garden for the first time since he came out of retirement.
How are you covering Afghanistan? Does the paper send a reporter to Afghanistan, or using wires and other ways?
We're doing both. We are using wire stories. Last week we had a reporter in Afghanistan. She usually covers eastern North Carolina. That's home to Camp Lejeune. We've got a lot of military bases here, and she went along with the units that's doing the food drop. So we got a first-person account of what it's like to drop food across Afghanistan. We're also using our Washington bureau. We're part of the larger Knight Ridder chain, so we've got an international staff ourselves. But we're pulling a bit from here and a bit from there, and then we're using our own staff in Charlotte as well.
We've got about a minute 15 left. Lauren, are your readers saying too much anthrax?
Mostly no. Mostly they want to know as much as they can, and it's a tough balance for the newspaper. We're trying not to add to the panic so many people already feel. We've only received maybe a dozen letters or so from people who are saying enough is enough, and the president's trying to tell us to get back to normal, and the Charlotte Observer isn't helping because it's printing so much news about anthrax. But most readers want to know as much as we can give them.
And Ms. Trochet, I'm wondering, are there things that you are not covering because of this? Are things going somewhat unnoticed in Chicago because of this?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think, we have big local stories here that we've still covered and put on the front page. In fact, during this, when the head of United Airlines was replaced, big local company, that was on page 1. The O'Hare International Airport expansion plans, the big story on page 1. So I don't really think our readers are going without any news that they wouldn't normally get.
And I think you suggested circulation was up a bit, is that right?
Yes.
And Lauren, same with you, circulation up or the same?
It's up by a few thousand copies. We're about 300,000 on weekends, and we hadn't seen those numbers for some years.
And just quickly, because I don't know, I know Chicago a little bit better. Most of your business, subscription business, or are you selling papers on the streets?
We're selling papers on the streets as well as subscriptions, both.
I'm sorry, and Lauren, how about you?
We're mostly a subscription business, but we're selling more papers on the streets nowadays.
Thank you both. I hope we'll do this again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It's a nice reality check all around. Thank you, guys. Coming up, workers at Ground Zero in New York are worrying about what is in the air they're breathing. We'll be right back.
How about BobTheBugKiller.com? Yeah, whatever, Bob. XLiveBugs.com. Okay, that doesn't even make sense. When am I gonna drop a dead bug?
We make it easy to create your online identity with a full spectrum of web extensions. Your only challenge is deciding on the perfect name.
TheBugReaper.com! That's brilliant.
Create your online identity and take the steps to get a .info extension with VeriSign today.
Closed captioning sponsored by eneg.cc, the source for .cc domains. Get a great web address for business or personal use. Go to www.eneg.cc and register today.
I'm Lou Dobbs with this Moneyline update. The markets today sharply lower after a weaker than expected report on consumer confidence. The Dow Jones Industrials plunging 147 points, the Nasdaq down nearly 2% on the day. And a management shakeup at Ford. Jack Nasser out as CEO. William Clay Ford Jr., the founder's great-grandson, takes his place. Watch Moneyline, 6 p.m. Eastern, weeknights on CNN.
Dobbs Moneyline Update is brought to you by Bank of America, embracing ingenuity. Log on to money.com for a snapshot of today's market movement.
What is possible? Does achievement discriminate? Or does it open its doors to everyone?
Well, you undoubtedly saw the pictures of people fleeing lower Manhattan 7 weeks ago today, covering their mouths as smoke and dust and debris covered them. Then came that unmistakable smell soon after from the fires that are still burning tonight. Quite a few of the firefighters down in the ground zero area in the early days say that today they are suffering from illnesses that they can only imagine were caused from breathing the air around ground zero. Fire department says they got protection for firefighters as fast as they could, and that some firefighters chose not to wear the protection they were given. We asked a department representative to join us on camera. The department declined. The science of what might be happening in a moment, but first hear from some of the firefighters who spoke to CNN's Jason Bellini.
Fires still burn beneath ground zero, and smoke still drifts the 20 or so blocks to Engine 15 fire station.
You smell that right now? Yeah. That's the Trade Center. That's the smell you're never going to forget.
This firefighter, who asked us not to give out his first or last name, is worried about a cough he has. It won't go away. He's sure the air at ground zero caused it. How bad is the cough?
Feeling all right? Bad enough that I can't take a deep breath without coughing. It's pretty constant, especially when I go to lay down or something at night, start coughing.
Other firefighters are complaining of symptoms similar to, and in some cases more serious than his. Enough, in fact, that every firefighter in the city will have their blood and urine checked for toxins.
They're asking for two guys every night from each company until they get through the whole department.
Everybody's being tested because that's what we wanted.
Leaders of the firefighters union say that on September 11th, when the dust and smoke was at its worst and the rescue effort at its most urgent, firefighters weren't given the equipment they needed.
You see, at the very beginning, they were giving you dust masks, which weren't sufficient. You needed respirators, and the respirators didn't come about for maybe a week and a half.
The white masks, the union says, couldn't block out the dark smoke and dust in the air. Later, firefighters were issued respirator masks like this one, but that doesn't stop many of them from being concerned about what the environment at ground zero may have done and may still be doing to their health.
When you go down to the Trade Center, there's guys in hazmat suits. Why are they all masked up and we're not? You know, I mean, they must know something that we don't.
They keep telling us it's okay, but I don't know if they're telling us the whole truth, you know?
So you're pretty nervous about it?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I'm pretty sure everyone else on my job is pretty nervous too.
Sherwin Chow is seeking the truth about his condition. He's on medical leave right now.
I've seen 3 pulmonary specialists so far. I've been taking all medications, and down here I'm taking all these inhalators and everything like that.
Aware there may be a problem, firefighters are trying to be careful. It's not always easy.
When you're on the pile trying to communicate, nobody can hear you if you have your mask on. So you're constantly putting it around your neck.
The fires won't go out for a long time.
I'm hoping that 10 years from now I'm not going to develop something.
Firefighters are worrying about themselves for a change. Jason Bellini, CNN, New York.
Again, we can't say for certain what is causing these illnesses among firefighters, but we can get an idea of what kind of air at ground zero, what that might do to a person from someone who has spent a career studying toxins and breathing. Dr. Joe Motterly is a toxicologist at the Lovelace Respiratory Research Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He joins us from there tonight. Good evening.
Good evening, Aaron.
I know you're not an MD here, but you've been working on this kind of material for a long time. Is it conceivable to you that there is no relationship between the illness that these people, the coughing, the respiratory problems, and what was in the air at ground zero?
Well, Aaron, let me preface my comments by saying that I haven't been to the site. and I haven't seen any data on air quality from the site, so any comments that I would make are just general observations from what I would imagine would be in the air.
Observe.
And you put to me a negative question, that is it conceivable that the material the men are breathing would not be the problem? And of course that would be difficult to prove. But I can tell you that from what one would imagine would be in the air, it's quite plausible that they could be having respiratory problems if they're not adequately protected.
You know, you look at Ground Zero today, you look at it back the way it was 7 weeks ago, and I remember being just 14 or 15 blocks from there wondering, what is it I'm breathing? To your knowledge, do they know what's in that air?
I haven't seen any data, Aaron, and so I can't really speak to that. I would imagine that the city has made some measurements. I have colleagues at New York University and Columbia University that are air quality experts, and I think there have been some measurements, but I don't know how well the exposures have been characterized.
And what would be the kinds of things in the air that would concern you?
What we have in the World Trade Center situation might best be envisioned as a combination between working in a mine with mineral dust and working at a fire where many things are burning or pyrolyzing and vapors are coming from them. From the rubbleizing of the structure, of course, you had a lot of cement dust. We saw that on TV. Dust from the structure, most of that would be mineral in nature. And then the fires would cause a range of combustion products, including soot, breakdown products of plastics, wood, material, and then what biological materials might be coming from the plants or human remains in the structure is another concern. So what we...
I'm sorry, just what we're showing our viewers here are some pictures we took shortly after the blast, and they're seeing the dust and the debris that just coated not only Ground Zero, but everything around it, all those apartments, the restaurants, and the rest. Is it unfair, in a sense, to say to the fire department, you should have protected your people better, given that nobody anticipated anything of this magnitude?
I wouldn't make any comment on the fairness of how the situation was handled. Obviously, it was a grave emergency. People were doing the best they could under the circumstances. But I can tell you that from the pictures that I've seen and from what I understand, it would certainly be reasonable to assume that the high exposures that occurred soon after the collapse would irritate the lung, cause coughing, and give people a respiratory problem. Even normal people that had not had problems before.
Mr. Marley, thanks for your time and your insight tonight. We appreciate it from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rumors of all sorts out there. We'll take a look at some of them, knock them down. Joel Stein of Time Magazine joins us in a moment.
I honestly have never seen anyone that was a father like he was a father. From the second she was born, they had a closeness that I've never seen. I was in labor for probably 36 hours, and after I had finally had her, he came running down to the recovery room and said to me, I can't believe it. And I would say, believe what, that I finally had her? And he said, no, I've only known her 2 minutes, and I love her so much, like I can't explain it. She was just his whole world. When she was first born, he was the one that got up at night, every night, even though I had to, get up and get it at 6. He'd race home from work, and, even when she was little, and he'd say, where is she? I said, she's sleeping, don't wake her up. And I'd go upstairs, and he'd be lying down with her on his stomach until she woke up. He loved being a dad. I won't find another him, that I know.
The Iditarod is like wrestling with Alaska herself. I've seen her tough side.
And her fragile side. I love them both. I care about her natural beauty and her natural resources.
And that's why I'm glad we have good neighbors like Williams. They're energy experts, and they've won awards here for environmental stewardship and community support.
They know that developing Alaska's resources only works when everybody wins.
Some situations call for trucks with more power. So engineer Mark Ferrone and the team have made GMC Sierras the most powerful line of pickups in the world. And to help manage all that torque, they've also given Sierra technically advanced braking systems. Mark may be obsessed with power, but he's not crazy. From professional-grade people come professional-grade trucks.
What is possible? Does achievement discriminate? Or does it open its doors to everyone?
Well, we're not in the business of reporting rumors, but the problem here is we're also not in the business of ignoring what people are talking about or worrying about. There are a ton of rumors out there, and thanks to the internet, they are ending up in emails all over the world. Sounded to us like a job for Joel Stein, who writes a regular humor column for Time magazine, less regular the last couple of months than it had been. It's nice to see you again. I was at the doctor today, and he asked me about...
I'm sorry.
Pardon?
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. You know, it's a cold. It won't go away, but it's not flu-like symptoms.
Good. That's what
Yeah, I know. And he asked me about this rumor that bad things are going to happen in shopping malls.
Right.
What do you know?
That's the Malloween rumor. Have you gotten this email?
No.
You're not reading your email. I'm getting this email.
I'm not surprised.
The email is that there's a young woman who was dating an Arab guy, either Saudi Arabian or Afghanistan, and he takes off a couple days before the attacks. And he leaves her a note, and it says, don't fly on the 11th, and stay away from malls on Halloween.
And somehow this ended up at a doctor in Midtown Manhattan and thousands of other places, or perhaps millions of other places. And we know how that happens?
Yeah, I mean, the FBI had to look into this rumor. And there was supposedly a note, and they were never able to find the note, and they say it's completely not true. Different versions of this rumor have kind of been floating around supposedly since the Napoleonic War. Like, basically, the other version of this rumor, which was that attacks were going to happen in LA this weekend, and like some woman was online with an Arab guy at some supermarket, and he was a couple bucks short. She gives him money, and then as she's leaving the supermarket, he says, listen, thanks for giving me the cash, and you stay out of LA this weekend.
It seems to me these rumors fall into two categories. There are the really kind of silly, weird ones, and then the ones that just, you go, oh my.
Then there's the ones that Ashcroft starts. Yeah.
Thank you. The U-Haul rumor.
Right. That there were 30 U-Hauls or Ryder trucks missing from the New York area. And the email says that this woman knows the daughter of some FEMA director, and he told her about this. And a bunch of Arab guys took out Ryder trucks and haven't returned them. And it's not true at all.
Not true. And how about, all right, on the other side of that's the naked women rumor.
Right. Like at 7 p.m., women are supposed to come out of their homes naked. And this will throw off the Islamic people, the guys, because naked women freak them out, and they'll leave the country. That one's true. Women, particularly attractive women, should come out at 7 p.m. every night. Do that. I think.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a very serious news program. We haven't laughed much around here.
No.
Our bosses aren't laughing now. Isn't that funny how it works?
Yeah,
tell me about the Snapple rumor.
Snapple rumor is that Osama owned Snapple. Snapple has this bad history. Like the 92, I think the KKK was supposed to own Snapple. But this one, at least, there's some reason why it came about. Because in Saudi Arabia, Snapple has a distribution deal with a Bin Laden company, because that family owns everything, and they own the distribution deal for Snapple in Saudi Arabia. So Snapple had to release a press release saying this wasn't true, and they actually, I think, broke off their deal with their Saudi Arabian distributor, just so that people won't get freaked out.
About a half a minute, I heard one, and I don't remember the detail, it had to do with, I think, Anheuser-Busch or Budweiser beers.
Yeah, the deal is that like a guy delivering Bud goes to a 7-Eleven in some small town, and he on September 11th, and he gets there to give them his Budweiser, and the Arab guys who own the 7-Eleven are like celebrating, And so he decides he's not giving them their bud. And eventually they go out of business because they have no bud. And Budweiser had to release a press release saying this wasn't true either.
And just to make it clear, you spent your day checking these out, not starting them.
The Naked Woman one may be the exception.
Nice to see you. Come back again, or at least we'll discuss it.
Okay.
Thank you. No rumor here. Michael Jordan is back. His comeback number 2 in a moment.
You're watching Special Report with Aaron Brown. Next, insight, opinion, and analysis on Greenfield at large. Depend on CNN.
How can you make unlimited wireless calls to home? How can you stay connected to your family without using up wireless minutes? Only Quest Wireless shared minute plans let you call home on your wireless phone without using plan minutes, plus make unlimited calls between plan members. Anything's possible when you have an advanced network and when you hold on to your phone. Now 2 people can share 3,600 minutes for only $59.99 a month. Nationwide wireless long distance included.
Hot chocolate with grandma. Guitar at summer camp. Your wedding anniversary. Memories that can all be lost in an accident like this. And while no car company can prevent such an accident, the International Brain Injury Association declared BMW the best at helping to protect you from severe brain injury. Something to remember before purchasing your next car.
I believe I should do a weekend of shopping in an hour.
I believe I should surf without tying up the phone.
I believe in anything that makes homework more fun.
More of the internet you want? You better believe it. It's AT&T at Home, the high-speed cable internet service from AT&T Broadband.
I believe in banishing the sounds of dial-up modems forever.
I believe in downloading the top 40.
Well, it's still the top 40.
Dude.
Call now and let this great deal on AT&T at Home make a believer out of you.
I believe I will.
AT&T Broadband. Believe in it.
Meet America's foremost artist, Peter Max, at Lawrence Galleries and see his dazzling new exhibition of art. Meet Peter Max in person on Saturday evening, November 3rd from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Lawrence Gallery located in Portland's Pearl District. And on Sunday, November 4th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Lawrence Gallery in Sheridan. For more information, call 503-228-1776. You don't want to miss this chance to meet Peter Max at the Lawrence Galleries.
A portion of all sales will be donated to the September 11th Fund.
America Strikes Back. Depend on CNN.
Well, we could drag out a lot of metaphors here, talk about second acts and going out on a high note, but who needs prose when there's poetry? Oh my goodness, I sounded like a sportscaster there. Michael Jordan's back in uniform at the Garden, opening night for the NBA, and day 1 of Michael's second comeback. When he came back the first time in '95, he scored 55 points that night. Tonight at 38, a little older, 19 points, and his team, the Washington Wizards, used to literally be his team. He owned a piece of them, lost by 2. Yes, security was tight. Yes, Knick fans being Knick fans. Jordan got some cheers and got some boos as well. Nice to have him back, though. And then there's that other thing up there in the Bronx somewhere. We can tell you the World Series going on. The Yankees are playing in it, and you can tell it's the 2001 World Series from the security that is in place. We touched on this earlier. Here's a little bit more. Gary Tuckman joins us from the stadium this evening. Gary.
Hello to you, Aaron. It wasn't that long ago when we talked about security at baseball games. We were mainly referring to cops on the scene to break up fights between drunk fans. But security these days has a much different connotation. And entering Yankee Stadium tonight felt like entering Fort Knox.
They've been playing World Series games for almost a century, but they've never been as security conscious as this night.
Secret Service is putting them through metal detectors, and they're checking all bags.
Arriving by Marine One, the President of the United States at Yankee Stadium to throw out the first ball. Arriving by car and subway, nearly 60,000 fans, encountering an elaborate blanket of protection.
Glad to see it. The more the better. Makes me feel better about bringing my kids here.
Most details on the security were kept under wraps.
I'm sorry, no comment.
All fans, news media, and even Yankees owner George Steinbrenner went through the detectors. Some received more elaborate checks. But everywhere you looked, there were police command posts, police lights, and policemen and women. Helicopters ferried security personnel and dignitaries, including New York's governor.
People are reassured by the fact that we do have heightened security. They know these are difficult times, and we have to make sure we do everything we can to protect people while at the same time going out to games like this and enjoying our freedom. It's very important.
Many of the earliest arrivals at Yankee Stadium did say they were nervous.
It's scary, but I'm not going to let it stop my life. We're Americans and we're strong and we're going to get through it.
Security will remain tight for the rest of the World Series. But President George W. Bush
Well, obviously we had an audio problem, but I'm sure what he was saying is it's a pretty good ball game out there tonight, and it's not over yet. Or words to that effect. Just ahead, people I like and the team that they hate. We'll be right back.
CSFB Direct, the highest rating for ease of use, and the #1 rating for broadest range of investment choices by Barron's. That's the difference between online trading and direct investing from CSFB Direct.
Finally, for this hour, the New York Yankees. You either love them or you hate them. I grew up in Minnesota. The choice was really easy. And as it turns out, I had plenty of company. Here's CNN's Jeannie Mose.
The World Trade Center rubble is no field of dreams, but it has made the World Series more serious. Is it possible that the Yankees, resented for their success, resented for their payroll, really have become America's team? Nah.
I've always hated the Yankees, and I don't see any reason to stop now. Anybody but New York.
I'm a loyal
Met
fan,
and I'll always hate the Yankees.
But wait, even fans of bitter arch-rival Boston are letting slip an encouraging word.
There's something about what New York has been through that makes me want the Yankees to come from behind in the same way that the United States will recover from this terrible hit we've suffered.
With all that's happened, I won't be as disappointed if they win.
Emotions stirred by the World Trade Center disaster even had Boston fans singing the Big Apple's praises at a game last month.
They were singing New York, New York during the 7th inning stretch.
And then there was the moment when the manager of the team the Yanks beat to get into the series admitted the unthinkable.
But I felt good for him, and that I really did. And that's a strange thought to come from a manager who's getting his ass kicked.
From a rival manager to folks at a Florida retirement community's Halloween party, solidarity abounds.
I've been there once in my life, and even I'm a New Yorker.
So go Yankees. Oh, absolutely, Yankees. How they say damn Yankees, am I allowed to swear?
Those damn Yankees.
There's enough hate for the Yankees to base a musical on. The love fest between former rivals is enough to make a Yankees head spin. You don't want any sympathy fans.
No, we don't need sympathy fans.
The series even has the Secretary General of the UN quoting Yogi Berra.
It ain't over until it's over.
These Boston fans can't get over their hard feelings.
Mayor Giuliani specifically told us to go back to life as normal, and life is normal for us is hating the Yankees. So, we're doing our patriotic duty.
Instead of needling the Yankees, some rescue workers down from Boston went under the needle at this New York tattoo parlor.
We had a crew of 10 guys down here from the Massachusetts Correctional Facility. They all got Yankee logo tattoos. I never thought I'd see the day Sox fans would get Yankee tattoos.
Their way of taking up arms. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
I could see rooting for him for 1 year. I didn't know the tattoo. 7 weeks ago tonight, right? This is what we saw. Well, it's actually quite a bit different now when you look at Ground Zero 7 weeks later. An awful lot has been done. But I'm not sure that the emotions of it has changed very much in 7 weeks. It's still sickening to look at, sad to see, 7 weeks ago tonight. We'll update the latest developments and more in just a moment.
Now batting, Jackie Robinson.
It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, fails while daring greatly, so that he shall never be with those timid souls who know neither victory or defeat.
What would you do if someone passed you the keys to a Pontiac Grand Prix for a week?
We're on our way to Lime Rock, premier Grand Prix racetrack around here.
Where else would you take a Grand Prix except on a Grand Prix track?
Let me see how you handle, baby.
Did I tell you? It's so much fun.
Get out of my way!
Talk about an adventure. None of us have ever been to AC. Tuxes, dinner. What do you mean it's nice? I don't look like a waiter.
Can you hit him? So what would you do with the Pontiac Grand Prix?
Elvis!
Tell us at Pontiac.com.
It's 11 o'clock here in the East, and here are the latest developments in America's new war. As the war on terrorism continues, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld says a modest number of U.S. Special Forces are now on the ground in Afghanistan, helping coordinate the air campaign against Taliban and al-Qaeda targets. In the United States, federal investigators are, quote, intensively considering the possibility people could be infected with anthrax by mail that was simply delivered to their home, not containing anthrax as such. That after a New York woman with no apparent connection to any known anthrax contamination was hospitalized. She's in critical condition with inhalation anthrax. And despite that increased concern, Health and Human Services Secretary Tommy Thompson is insisting America is safe. As if to emphasize that point, the president threw out the first ball at tonight's Game 3 out at the World Series in Yankee Stadium. Vice President Cheney, there's the president on the mound at baseball's home office. Let him throw the ball. There we go. Vice President is in a secret location following the terrorist warning issued yesterday. Those are the headlines at a minute past 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. We turn things over to Jeff Greenfield and tonight's edition of Greenfield at Large. Jeff.
Thanks, Aaron. Tonight we're going to look at some of the ways this new conflict may be changing America, the kinds of change that wars always bring, or maybe the kinds of changes that may be unique to our time. But first, as you mentioned, Aaron, today brought the news of a new category of victim in the anthrax attacks. New York officials confirmed that a 61-year-old woman now on a respirator is battling anthrax she contracted by inhaling it. She is the first victim who has no immediately apparent link to any government or media facility. Joining us to talk about what this case might mean is Philip Hanna. He is professor of microbiology and immunology at the University of Michigan Medical School. He joins us from Ann Arbor. So, Dr. Hanna, you heard this story. Yes. This woman is fighting for her life. No links to any of the cases we've heard before. What might that tell you?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, as was reported just a moment ago, that some anthrax from a different letter ended up on one of hers. I'm sure FBI and federal government law enforcement agencies are very interested and worried whether there's been a change in strategy and maybe people are getting directly mailed anthrax in letters addressed to themselves, or even another possibility that there's a different MO and she was in a place exposed to anthrax that was not related to mail at all.
Could there, now a lot of people are wondering whether or not a letter addressed to her could somehow have made contact with one of those anthrax letters at some post office facility. Is that even possible? And if it is, what would that tell you about the potency of the anthrax involved?
Let me take the second part first. I don't think we have a clear idea about the weaponization and what that really means for increased potency for anthrax. Medical researchers such as myself and the people that I know around the country and around the world are not people that know about weapons. And the people that know about weapons maintain a classified environment for their work and don't share, and probably for good reasons. So we have two different cultures going on, those that do medical research and those that are experts in bioweapons, and they're not the same people most of the time. As for whether the anthrax could have gotten accidentally on one of her letters when it was in an envelope addressed to someone else is a different question. I don't know of any type of paper or envelope that is routinely used in the mail that would leak spores out or could be passed through the paper itself. It's always possible there's been rips. I've had rip mail, I'm sure most people have, and that it got grossly contaminated in that manner, from a ripped envelope addressed to another federal site or news agency.
If I may, is this one of those reports that when you, as a researcher, hears it, you say, we could be in a lot more difficulty than I thought 48 hours ago?
Well, it's possible. Another scenario is there's a lot of anthrax letters out there that aren't causing sickness that we know of, and we may only be seeing a small percentage of the total numbers of letters in the system, and that most of them end up being duds.
Now, let me just switch gears on another issue, because one of the things that puzzles a layperson such as myself is I pick up a respected newspaper and they are making the case, they seem very strongly committed to the idea that this is of domestic origin. I turn on a respected network news organization and they seem very committed to the idea that this anthrax had to come from Iraq or another state. Are we in a situation where at some point, with enough research, we're going to get a definitive answer, or could this be one of those things where we're never going to know?
Yeah, that's going to be a question, and it's left to law enforcement. And it's really odd that these days that public health measures in a particular outbreak of a disease is really led by law enforcement efforts. And usually you don't see the FBI and other law enforcement officers at really the key point in a public health effort. Now, I have not seen the reports. They're still under investigation. I've not been part of this investigation, and I can't offer an expert opinion until we see what is actually known by the FBI and people doing analyses.
Okay, fair enough. So let me ask you one final question, and it is a hypothetical. Suppose the president called you in and said, okay, Dr. Hanna, I want you to tell me what our strategy ought to be about both reassuring and alerting the public. What ought we to be doing now, either substantively or in terms of our message to the public? And you tell him what?
Well, I think we should not overstate our confidence on this matter. I think we should take everything quite seriously, shut down post offices. We should have zero tolerance for exposure of other people in instances where we know that anthrax exists. I would also add that with all our technology in the areas of bioforensics, DNA forensics, and other things, they should also focus our law enforcement efforts on figuring out who has the capabilities to make weapons. And maybe they already are, but that has not been released. Who knows how to mill and package and prepare powders and samples that would make a bug that we haven't ever claimed victory over, but we've had a truce with for many, many decades.
Okay. Dr. Hanna, thank you very much for joining us. I also appreciate your willingness to say what you don't know every bit as much as what you do know. That's been in short supply in some circles, and thank you for that. When we come back, we're going to ask the question, is this in fact a new age for America? In a minute.
Into reality TV, high-definition television, made possible by Panasonic.
As an actress, I often play vain, self-absorbed characters, but they're not the real me. No, in real life, I'm relaxed, easygoing. Talk about easy. Take this Olympus digital camera from CompUSA. I just take a picture, and presto, I see immediately what I got. Well, that's not a good picture. Don't like my smile. Ugh. Well, you get the idea.
Now, buy any Olympus digital camera, get a free smart media card and camera case.
Anything in the mail?
Junk. Hey, look at this.
What?
A credit card pre-approved. You know what that means?
We already have a credit card.
But it's pre-approved. What do you want? A trip to Bermuda?
The Caymans?
Yeah. Or a nice dinner out.
You know what I want? A house.
Using credit wisely is the first step toward owning a home. Call for the free guide on credit from the Fannie Mae Foundation and for a list of lenders and credit counselors.
Women want you to believe they have to suffer to stay in shape. But what about Kellogg's Special K? Does that look like suffering to you? Delicious, lightly toasted flakes and only 110 calories? Doesn't sound so bad to me. Maybe it's time for me to do the Special K thing.
Kellogg's Special K. Looking good never tasted so great.
New terrorism warnings put America on high alert. And how big can the anthrax threat get? Secretary Tommy Thompson, the director of the CDC, and others. Tonight, midnight Eastern on Larry King Live. You can depend on CNN.
Despite government warnings of more terrorism, our nation remains strong. We'll show you how Americans are trying to balance anxiety and living normal lives. Join Paul Azan, 7 a.m. Eastern. You can depend on CNN tomorrow.
We're back, and we'll turn now to the main focus of tonight's show. It's been said countless times since September 11th, everything will change. Okay, but can we get a little more specific? When a nation at peace suddenly finds itself in a major conflict, what is likely to change in our politics, in our culture? History, and even the last 7 weeks, provide some clues. In wartime, government matters more. World War II may have had more to do with the growth of the national government than the New Deal, because Washington drafted American men, centralized decisions about what industries would grow, and thus where jobs would be more plentiful. You can see this already. Billions in public money allocated to rebuild New York City, a much bigger government presence in airports and on airplanes. Politics matters more too. That would mark a dramatic change from even a year ago when the U.S. held what was called the Seinfeld election, about nothing much at all. Our heroes are likely to change. As author David Brooks noted in a recent essay, the corporate achievements of a Bill Gates or a Jack Welch don't seem especially heroic now compared with men who risked and lost their lives to save others. And that, in turn, may change our sense of, say, masculinity itself. A little less Alan Alda, a little more John Wayne. Patriotism flourishes during wartime, of course, but more than that, earnestness comes into fashion again. The mocking, ironic tone of so much of our recent culture may not be quite as attractive when the sense of peril is literally all around us. And even before September 11th, the change in our national economy suggested a move away from the conspicuous consumption that dominated so much of the 1990s. Well, joining us to talk about these and other possibilities are Ellen Levine, editor-in-chief of Good Housekeeping. She's here in New York. In Washington, Weekly Standard senior editor David Brooks, whose essay, The Age of Conflict, helped inspire this conversation. And in Chicago, Haynes Johnson, author of The Best of Times, America in the Clinton Years, who's been traveling and talking to people around the country the past few weeks. I want to begin by getting a kind of personal touchstone from each of you. Ellen, you edited a magazine, Good Housekeeping, that's aimed at millions of Americans. Did you have to change what you were going to do for your very traditional Christmas issue?
Yes, we certainly did. Christmas is generally a gingerbread house. And this year we had a gingerbread red barn, quite charming. We called it Back from the Printer. On top of the barn we built a little steeple and we made a little gingerbread cookie flag on the top of it, and we inserted 7 pages about the tragedy. We actually, very unfortunately, lost a staff member on the flight that went down in Pennsylvania, and many of us being here in New York had personal experiences we wanted to share with the readers.
Haynes, as we mentioned, you've been out talking to folks the last 5 weeks. You've also spent more time than that teaching kids at universities. Can you see now the signs of a sea change in the country?
It's fascinating, Jeff. I've been traveling the country for weeks now, and before that for years writing about America, but I've never seen a time like this. Everywhere you go, on the surface, everything is wonderful. It's been a beautiful fall. I walked down the beaches in California. I saw people in their swimsuits out with their frisbees and doing all that. It looks prosperous and all that, but you talk to one person anywhere, and no matter what age, no matter what group, and all of a sudden something pours out. They've been affected in a way they've never been affected in their lives. They feel a sense of they don't know what's coming. They know their lives have changed. They talk about their jobs, their careers, their marriage, their loves. Everything about it is different. There's a great deal of uncertainty. It's not a matter of panic, but it's a deep apprehension, and everyone is figuratively looking over one shoulder America, what's going to come next, and what does this do to us? It's profound. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of writing about America.
Now, David Brooks, you wrote a much-praised book, Bobos in Paradise, about how the baby boomers tried to reconcile a personal consumption with their values, and how that kind of came to a fruition, I guess, in the 1990s. Is that age, do you think, over? Did September 11th mark, I don't know what to call it, maybe you do, a more serious approach to life in general on the part of these bourgeois bohemians?
Yeah, I wrote that book at the right time, because if it had come out now, it'd be totally outdated. I can't even bear to think about it. I'm so bored by it, and it's so dead. You know, the people I wrote about, when they talked about war, it was their conflict with their kitchen renovators. But now we've got real war. And what I'm struck by is the young. I've been on college campuses the last week, and when I wrote about kids like this 6 months ago, they were sort of leading junior workaholics of America lives, doing their homework, going to community service, doing crew, doing soccer, you know, one step after another in the great ladder of achievement up to their investment banking jobs. Now, on the other hand, if you go to college campuses, in the dining halls, there's fierce debates about the war. There's fierce debates about politics, something they had absolutely no interest in. They have been utterly transformed in a way that's serious. And one of the things that strikes me is the professors. The professors are listening to the kids in a way that says, not just what do these kids think, but they're saying, hey, I'm 45, all I know is Vietnam. Maybe that's not the right rubric for this conflict. I've got some learning to do as well.
So, Ellen, that's an interesting point that David raises. It is true that the culture, not only on campuses, but in places like New York, patriotism was never what you would call the major value. Can we begin to say that even in liberal politics as well, that there's going to be a change in the approach, in the way we think about government, in the way we think about the military?
I think it's a little too early to know what we are going to think 3, 4, 5 months from now. I do know that while this sea change is happening on college campuses, we often forget that in Middle America, every July 4th, those flags come out, the cakes are baked with the red, white, and blue on it, and a lot of this, the core of the middle of the country may not be changing as much as the fringes. Certainly in the age, we noticed that in the first couple of days, our young staffers ran out of the office screaming. It was probably 3 weeks later that the older staffers started to have their breakdowns.
Haynes Johnson, I mentioned in the introduction that conflict makes people take government more seriously. You may remember President Clinton's famous, the era of big government is over. Do you think that has changed because of September 11th?
Yes, it has changed, and I think that's permanent. I really do. Well, nothing's permanent in life, I mean, but certainly the attitudes are very markedly different. What David describes on the campuses about the professors and the students, and I think also what Alan talked about Middle America, it's true there too, I can tell you. That you have a talk with people, all of a sudden now they appreciate government for what it is. It's security, it's government services, it's the firemen, it's the policemen, it's the nurses, it's the emergency workers, it's the people that provide security, it's all these things that and the people that are fighting the war for us. All of a sudden that has become ascendant in people's minds, and they realize there's an appreciation for it. It doesn't mean they put aside their conservative or liberal shibboleths, but it does mean that they are looking in a very different way. I can remember when talking to people when I was doing my book, the Stanford students said they were chasing the good life generation. They had no thought of government. It was irrelevant, didn't matter. Now those same kids are saying it's really different, that it matters, it's important.
David, one of the things that came out of World War II was a kind of seriousness of post-war purpose. There were things that the government decided to do that radically changed America, whether it was the GI Bill of Rights that put millions into the middle class, encouraging the growth of suburbs. Is there any sense you think that what happened September 11th is going to refocus energies in the political sense on real agendas, big stuff?
I'm really interested in that question because there has been this renewed confidence in government, but it's been government to achieve certain limited things so far, things like order, authority, protection. We know now that our private lives require public protection. Whether that confidence in government will spill out into a great welfare state, a great liberal renewal, is something I'm a little dubious about, in part because the money won't be there. We're going to increase our spending in defense. We've already got huge amounts of money we've got to spend on Social Security and Medicare. So I just think there may be an increase in trust in government, but it won't be a welfare state trust. It'll be trust in the order-keeping parts of government, authority. And the crucial issue that comes out of this whole war is power. How do we deal with power? The conflict is not between hawks and doves. It's between lions and foxes. Lions want to use power forthrightly. They want to go on to Baghdad after Desert Storm. The foxes want to use power cleverly and subtly. They don't want to go on to Baghdad. That's the kind of conflict we're going to be seeing.
We're going to take a break and come back to this, and we're also going to try to get to the topic, if our politics will change, what about the broader culture? But we'll be back after this.
That was possibly the finest rock and roll show I have ever seen. I Smell World Tour!
Wow. You mean the whole world?
Yeah. You're not Gene. You're not Paul. You guys aren't Kiss?
No. But we did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Stay smart. Stay at a Holiday Inn Express.
Come on. Come on, boy.
Come on. You want to wrestle with Daddy?
They go at this every weekend. I guess it's a guy thing.
Come on, Duke.
I sure hope you have a good dental plan.
Yeah. We've got Delta.
Huh?
We've got Delta Dental.
No one protects you like Delta Dental. We keep you smiling.
Begonias look good. Thanks.
In the past, serious and persistent mental illness meant only isolation and despair. But today, with better treatments and more support, there's new hope. For more on mental health information and resources from the Center for Reintegration, visit freeservices.webmd.com. Today, George will earn a raise, Laura will move in on her own, and Matt will create a sunrise. Visit freeservices.webmd.com. Reintegration. Back to work. Back to life.
Going wherever the news is happening to get the inside story. Wolf Blitzer. Another reason why you can depend on CNN.
There's one brand of truck strong enough to carry the American spirit. Chevrolet. And right now, get 0% financing on every new truck we build. Silverado, Tahoe, Suburban, Trailblazer. The trucks behind a country that never quits. And you can own one, interest-free. Keep America rolling. See your local Chevy dealer today.
Whether an electrical job is large or small, it's important to get the job right the first time. That's why the switch to safety is on to NECA IBEW Local 48. Our electrical contractors set the highest industry standards in safety for today's complex electrical work. And our electricians receive the most comprehensive education and safety training in the business, assuring you of a job right the first time. The switch to safety is on to NECA IBEW Local 48.
CNN.
And we're back talking about what September 11th might have meant in terms of long-term changes in America, and with help from Good Housekeeping's Ellen Levine, from David Brooks of the Weekly Standard, and from author Haynes Johnson. Ms. Levine, you got a different take on what we might want or need from our government, which is what?
First of all, I think to a certain extent, speaking to what our other panelists have been saying about American baby boomers have a little been like adolescents, rebelling against government, mommy and daddy, but now we need mommy and daddy and we're behaving a little better. However, I think that this is a terrific opportunity for the government to take to educate the population about what it is that we're facing, what it is that we're going to be facing over a long period of time. I look back at issues of magazines from the 1940s, and before we went into the war, there were years of getting ready for it. If we look back 1 year in Good Housekeeping, you'll see people in uniform. There was a big buildup, and I'm hoping that that the government takes this opportunity to get us ready to understand how complicated things are. Right now, I think we're in crisis management. That's not a very good way to educate a public.
Let me, David, pick up on something you wrote in the Weekly Standard, because it raises, for me at least, a rather provocative question. You talked about that in an age of conflict, that values like compassion, tolerance, and industriousness are valued less than the classical virtues of courage, steadfastness, and a ruthless desire for victory. Now, to oversimplify, those are generally considered masculine rather than feminine traits. And so my question, and here comes the curveball, is, do you think, as happened after World War II, when women were invited out of the factories back home, that even with the feminist revolution of the last 30 years, for instance, will it make it tougher for women to be elected to office if we want more of the classically masculine virtues?
Yeah, I really don't think so. I think women, as we've seen with Margaret Thatcher, can be just as tough as men. It will make us more bloody-minded. It won't be more, I feel your pain. It'll be, I cause you pain. It'll be a whole new era of being extremely tough. In the Cold War, they went to a theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr. And Niebuhr was a pacifist before World War II. But then he saw the Nazis and said, okay, I can't be a pacifist anymore. That doesn't work. I'm going to believe in causing violence. I'm going to believe in conflict. There's evil in the world and we have to fight it. But I'm going to say at the same time, what I'm about to undertake in this war against the Soviet Union, or now the Taliban, is morally hazardous. I'm going to do such horrible things to win this war, which we have to do, that I have to ask forgiveness for God. And that's sort of a bloody-minded, tough-minded way to look at morality. In the age of harmony of the 1990s, that was not the sort of tough-mindedness we were showing as a country. And it'll be interesting to see if we can do it this time.
It's interesting, Haynes, because on the broader culture, we have had a generation in which conflict, other than the relatively swift and bloodless Gulf War, has really not been in fashion. Is there a gap, you think, between the political leadership that grew up in Vietnam and what the culture and the politics now demand, if David's right?
Oh, sure. There's a huge gap. I mean, very few people have served in the military, for instance. Very few Americans have ever seen danger of a war, or combat, or the rest. We have a professional military force, which is the legacy of Vietnam. They're all fighting for us. We're over here at home. Somehow, the job of the leadership of the country and the whole country being educated, what Ellen said, I agree with her, that this is an opportunity to educate the country about the larger purposes of the society. That means educating us to what we all have a place in it and a role to play, and you don't just rely upon the firemen to take care of our cities and policemen and so forth. We have to do something ourselves, and I think that's going to be the real test of political leadership. The persons who express that best will be honored and will be rewarded with the jobs. Those who don't, I don't think will win. About the women, though, I think that I agree with David and I disagree with him, that women in this country are the positive force for change. And we've seen that over and over again. And I think that's going to happen in politics and diplomacy, too. Yes, they had to be tough, but they've got to be measured, too. I don't think it's all just bloody, but we'll see.
Perhaps we'll let the woman in this conversation in. What do you think about this notion that the masculine virtues are in ascendancy?
I don't think there's such a clear divider line between masculine and feminine virtues anymore. And actually, before some of this started to happen, women were saying they wanted to be at home with their children when the children were little. This is not anything that's new, but I do think it's quite clear to women they will vote for the right candidate. If there's a tough woman, she's going to get elected. My sense is there's going to be no going back to the kitchen for the women. Number one, we need the money, particularly in difficult times. We're counting on two incomes.
David, we're down to our last minute or so, and here's one thing that struck me as I was thinking about this program. We talk about what wartime does to a country, but there's always a post-war period. I mean, every war we've been in, we know when it's ended, mostly in victory, and with Vietnam not so. But in this shadowy war, what happens if the conflict changes the culture and there's no post-war period? That 5 or 10 years from now, we're still in this long twilight struggle. We've never had to deal with that culturally, have we?
Yeah, there will be no victory parade, as the president said. It'll be like being an offensive lineman. If you don't get a penalty called on you, then you've won. If there's no more terror attacks, then we'll won. But that won't be a glorious thing. We'll know that there's evil in the world, that not all cultures are equal, that not all people are equal. We're going to have to form judgments. It's going to be, as the president suggested, a permanent change in the way we think.
Okay. Well, what I think, in fact, what I know is we're out of time. So my thanks to my guests, Good Housekeeping Editor-in-Chief Ellen Levine, Weekly Standard Senior Editor David Brooks, and Haynes Johnson, author of The Best of Times, America in the Clinton Years. I'm Jeff Greenfield. Thank you for watching. Lou Dobbs' Moneyline is next. Good night.
Into reality TV, high-definition television, made possible by Panasonic.
You've all read this. Top shelf consultants. $2 million. Pure strategic thinking could put us years ahead. The board is psyched. I'm psyched. It's a brilliant plan. One question. Given our current technology, is this implementable?
No.
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 Strategies you can actually execute?
No.
Now there's a plan.
Still psyched?
In 1935, Foxwood Farm started with one horse and a truck. The horse was a thoroughbred, the truck a Chevy Suburban. Today they have a few more horses, but there's still only one truck, Chevy Suburban. With an available 8.1-liter Vortec engine, it's capable of towing up to 6 tons, making it the best Suburban yet. Chevy Suburban, like a rock.
Turbulent times require leadership. That's why we invite you to join America's top CEOs and Mayor Rudolph Giuliani in New York for Leadership in Turbulent Times, a conference benefiting the American Red Cross. Get first-hand perspective on how your business can rise to the challenge from Jeff Immelt of GE, Gordon Bethune of Continental Airlines, Steve Case of AOL Time Warner, Michael Dell, and Professor Gary Hamill. Call 1-800-522-7711 now or visit fortune.com to register.
This is Lou Dobbs' Moneyline for Tuesday, October 30th.
Good evening. Top government officials today adding their voices to the call for Americans to remain vigilant.
Continue to live your lives. Continue to be America. But be aware.
We must ensure that our transportation system will never be used as engines of destruction.
And new cases of anthrax discovered today. Traces found in additional buildings in the nation's capital. And a New York City hospital has been forced to close temporarily. Low-flying U.S. jet fighters pounding Taliban targets today around southern Afghanistan. The Pentagon today said the war is going as planned and they're prepared for the long haul. And a sell-off on Wall Street today for the second day in a row, sparked by a disappointing report on consumer confidence. A major shakeup at the world's second largest car maker. After nearly 3 years as the president and CEO of Ford, Jack Nasser is stepping down. Stepping up is William Clay Ford Jr. Fred Katayama traveled to Dearborn, Michigan, and has the report.
Ford employees greeted their new leader with a standing ovation.
In addition to my duties as chairman, I will become chief executive officer.
The nation's second largest automaker ousted the autocratic Jack Nasser, replacing him with William Clay Ford Jr., the great-grandson of the company founder Henry Ford. The 44-year-old Ford is rich in pedigree, but short on managerial experience. But he says he's up to the job.
I have a track record. The people around this company know me, and the board felt that I was the person at this point to help heal the company and get us back on track.
As chairman, he let Nasser publicly handle the messy job of steering the company through the Firestone tire scandal, which mostly involved Ford Explorers. Under Nasser, Ford lost money for the last 2 quarters, as well as market share. Employee morale plunged after the company tried to implement a system of ranking managers. And Ford, once tops in quality among the Detroit automakers, fell to the bottom in the latest survey. The company's stock has dropped nearly in half during Nasser's 2.5-year reign. Analysts say because Ford is a tenderfoot, he will rely heavily on his 2 lieutenants, the new COO Nick Shayla and the new vice chairman Carl Reichardt, to restructure the company.
The important thing from our perspective is that he's assembled a very good management team around him to execute on that strategy.
I have a lot of confidence in Nick Shayla. I think it's incumbent on him to surround himself with top people and set a mission that is achievable. And, there's a lot of talent inside Ford.
Shayla says he'll come up with a restructuring plan around year's end.
Bill Ford says everything is up for review. He says he'll shift the company's focus back to basics building and designing good cars and trucks. And analysts suspect he'll also focus on high dividends, something which Nasser chopped in half. The Ford family, after all, owns 40% of the company. Lou?
Do you think they had a voice in this decision?
Yeah, well, they say that the family, with that voting stake, certainly will have been persuaded by Bill Ford himself, since he is chairman of the board and represents the Ford family members. But at the news conference, Ford said he talked it over with Nasser yesterday, then talked to the board later that day. The board voted on it this morning.
You know, I find it strange, Fred, that we have a situation where the CFO of Ford will now report to a vice chairman, not to the CEO. There seems to be some enthusiasm on the part of the analysts with whom you spoke about this new vision for Ford, which seems to be, as it's been articulated at least today by the new CEO, to turn out cars and trucks. What were they doing before?
Right, Lou. As for the CFO reporting, it does sound sort of strange. I asked the question at the news conference, and Bill Ford says the reason that the CFO will report to the vice chairman instead of him is because the vice chairman was a former head of Wells Fargo and has a lot of expertise in finance. He'd like to rely on him.
We will take that as the answer. Fred, thank you very much. Fred Katayama from Detroit. The terrorist attacks and anthrax attacks are having a much greater impact on the economy than had been first thought. Consumer confidence this month plunged to the lowest level in more than 7 years. Widespread layoffs and rising unemployment also contributing to growing pessimism. Kathleen Hayes is here now and has the story for us. Kathleen?
And people were a little bit surprised, Lou, because the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Survey last week was rather steady. But this is the Conference Board survey, 5,000 households that they survey every month for decades. Their index plunged to 85.5 in October from 97 in September. The lowest level in several years, and in fact 4 monthly declines in a row. And as you can see, that's the kind of slide that makes people worry about recession. What is fueling it? Well, job layoffs for one, rising unemployment. Big corporations around the world have laid off or announced layoffs for more than 690,000 people in the past several months. The economy is stagnating, maybe heading downhill. And on top of that, a war on terrorism that is injecting an element that Americans have really never had to deal with.
It's outside of really of economics. It is, of course, the terrorist attack on September 11th, and it's also the continuous anthrax scare. You're introducing bioterrorism to the formula, and that's a very scary business. From my point of view, we really ripped the social fabric.
And in fact, DeLaw Smith says he thinks that one thing would help mend confidence is for Americans to see some victories in this war on terrorism, some arrests, maybe figure out where the anthrax is coming and what we can do about it. It's interesting, this is an October number. We know now the economy in the fourth quarter of the year was sliding, at least in this confidence measure. Tomorrow we get a third quarter number, which is going to say we were already in pretty bad shape. Third quarter GDP, gross domestic product, is forecast to fall about a percentage point. Look, fourth quarter 99, the economy was growing at an 8% annual rate going into Y2K. Look where we are now, a steady downtrend. This is why many people say we have fallen into recession, and that number tomorrow, if it is negative, is certainly going to increase that talk.
And part of the reason we call them cycles.
Yes, and we have lived through them, and we'll probably live through this one too.
Well, let's certainly hope so. All right, Kathleen, on that up note, thank you very much, Kathleen Hayes. Well, that weak consumer confidence report pushing investors to send the indexes lower for a second straight day. More than $200 billion of market capitalization today were erased. The Dow, the NASDAQ, S&P 500, all down more than 1.5% on the session. We turn to Christine Romans at the New York Exchange, Greg Clarkin at the NASDAQ market site, and let's begin with you, Christine.
Well, Lou, here's some more good news. The Dow had been down about 200 points, and it closed down well off of its lows and above 9,100, so that's good news. But let's take a look at some of the big board losers here. Some of the stocks that are on the downside. Bristol-Myers Squibb announcing some job cuts. CVS and all the pharmacy stocks moving lower after CVS warned. Enron down again, lowest price since 1993. This one continues to get hammered. And Selectron down again here today. A bunch of brokerage downgrades, but there were some bright spots. An IPO, an initial public offering. Anthem Health doing quite nicely here today. Campbell's Soup up after the company guided higher. It said that people are buying soup after September 11th. Newmont Mining and all the gold and silver stocks doing quite nicely as there was flight to quality, some worries about Argentina and a weak dollar today. And Procter & Gamble up almost $3 on the session. It's a Dow component, so it mitigated some of those losses that we saw in the Dow 30. It actually beat the street's expectations and maintained its guidance for 2002. That's good news on Wall Street. Lou?
All right, and thank you for the good news, Christine. The NASDAQ down nearly 2% on the day. Greg Clarkin at the NASDAQ Market Center. Greg?
And Lou, I'll tell you, the NASDAQ down about 100 points over the last 3 sessions, close to 6% drop over that time span. Take a look at how some of the big name technology shares did today. We had a lot of brokerage houses weighing in on these companies. Dell Computer lost ground after Merrill Lynch cut their revenue and earnings estimates. Sun lost ground, Intel lost ground, and Cisco Systems, one of the few gainers, was up about 1% or so on the day, 1657. Now, some other stocks in the news include shares of Juniper. Merrill Lynch downgrading after that stock ran up 110% over the last 4.5 weeks. They figured that valuation was a little too rich. That stock gives back better than $1 on the day. And eBay, after a big loss yesterday, rebounds today up 89 cents. Macrovision, though, down about 30% on the day. This is a software company that sees no growth in the fourth quarter. That stock being hit hard. And watch Adobe Systems tomorrow. After the bell today, the company issuing a profit warning. That could be a real actively traded issue. Lou, back to you.
Greg, thanks. Greg Clarkin. Just ahead, a national ID card system, how a small addition to your pocket could be an effective weapon in the fight against terrorism. And we'll report on the Coast Guard, which has stepped up patrols protecting our shores, but now the Coast Guard is being forced to take a new look at how it deploys limited resources. That story and more still ahead. Stay with us.
What kind of rooms you got?
King size.
You got room service?
Donuts and coffee.
Got entertainment?
All rooms have every movie ever made in every language, anytime, day or night.
How is that possible?
This is the technology that makes it happen. This is Riding the Light. Quest.
It's easy to take electricity for granted. A lot of us aren't even sure where it comes from. So we're sometimes surprised to learn that over half of the electricity we use comes from coal.
Mrs. Wendler!
And thanks to a $50 billion investment in clean coal technologies by America's electric utilities that use coal, it's getting cleaner every day, helping us protect something we can't take for granted: our environment.
New terrorism warnings put America on high alert. And how big can the anthrax threat get? Secretary Tommy Thompson, the director of the CDC, and others. Tonight, midnight Eastern on Larry King Live. You can depend on CNN.
There is now a rising interest in a national identity card. The government has long been and continues to be opposed to that idea, but a growing number of Americans do favor it. National ID cards are in use in many countries around the world, and as Steve Young now reports, they could be an effective first guard against terrorism.
Something there is in the American psyche that does not love mandatory identification cards. But since the September attacks, opinion seems to be swaying. Close to 70% of the American public now supports a system of national ID cards. Americans think it might help prevent future terrorist acts, although the White House is one important exception. The issue has turned some ideologues on their ear. Card-carrying liberal attorney Alan Dershowitz now supports national ID.
National ID card, a limited national ID card, which would have the name, the address, the social security number, the photograph, and a print, fingerprint or retinal print matchable to a computer chip, would simply make identity theft impossible. It would eliminate the need for any kind of racial or ethnic profiling.
But the idea of a national ID card gives one libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute, hives.
The national ID card system is really the ultimate dragnet device. It would require over 250 million Americans to surrender some of their privacy, some of their freedom, for a system that I do not think will stop the terrorists from committing acts of violence here in the United States.
Would not work, Lynn says, because terrorists could bribe card issuers, card checkers, or they could recruit young people with spotless pasts. That hasn't stopped a host of European countries, including Germany, France, and Spain, from adopting ID systems. The heart would be a monster database, and Oracle CEO says he'd give the software to the government free.
We have to give them the tools, databases, cards, and the latitude to protect us. And if we do, our liberties and our lives will be saved together.
Advocates say it would be important to guard against too much information being required or shared. Critics predict first ID cards would be required at airports, then more and more places in what they call function creep. Luke?
What has been the experience, Steve, in Europe with these national ID cards? Are they effective?
Well, France, for example, has an ID card and has had plenty of terrorist incidents. It's been a kind of mixed bag.
A mixed bag?
A mixed bag.
Okay, I think we'll put that down under for further consideration. Okay. All right, Steve, thanks. Steve Young. For more than 200 years, I should say, the Coast Guard has been the first line of defense along our nation's shores. But with the country on heightened alert now, increased patrols are putting a tremendous strain on limited resources. The Coast Guard is having a difficult time performing critical day-to-day duties that keep the country, the economy moving and secure. Kitty Pilgrim reports.
They are everywhere along the 95,000 miles of U.S. coastline on highest alert. They are working 84-hour watch shifts instead of 40. At 35,000 people, the Coast Guard is the same size it was in 1967, smaller than the New York City Police Force. 3,000 reservists have been called up.
I can tell you that they are really being pushed to the limit. They're working longer shifts. They're relying for more help from the auxiliary. And it's clearly a situation that we have to pay attention to.
The Coast Guard's annual budget is $4.6 billion, the cost of 2 nuclear subs. The service is asking for $200 million more. The Coast Guard used to do primarily weather patrol, but over the years the duties extended to drug enforcement and patrols for illegal aliens. Now it must escort cruise ships in and out of port, monitor and investigate 68,000 port calls by foreign vessels, sometimes boarding them for inspection, spending an additional $1.5 million a day. 5,500 ships have been boarded since September 11th. Ships must register 96 hours in advance of putting into port, all cargo and crew, so the Coast Guard can run background and security checks. Painstaking, labor-intensive work.
We have never done anything like that. Usually 24 hours was the required notice. And we didn't check all the vessels. The 96-hour notice gives us the opportunity to really look at all the vessels coming in and decide which ones we need to target.
One of the hardest things to gauge is how long the state of alert has to be in effect. Now, this level of security demands manpower and money, and for now, the time frame appears to be indefinite. Lou?
And what does it look like in the way of prospects for relief for the Coast Guard? More money, more help?
They've asked for $200 million. Their budget is $4.6 billion. $200 million in the scheme of things doesn't seem like that much. We'll see.
It isn't. That's a surprisingly small request.
Small number. They run on fairly scant resources. Most of their ships are 3 decades old.
It sounds like more money may be under consideration.
Let's hope so.
All right, Kitty. Thanks. Kitty Pilgrim. Just ahead on Wall Street, stocks hit as consumer confidence slides. My next guest, a market veteran, will tell us what we can expect of this market in the days and weeks ahead. Stay with us.
Coming up, Lou speaks with the Chief Investment Officer from First Albany, Hugh Johnson.
I'd like to take a look at my investments. Can Fidelity help me with some planning? Go through what I'm invested in, goals and so forth?
Of course. You know, now might be a good time to look at your entire portfolio.
Yeah? You can help?
Well, certainly. With Fidelity Portfolio Review, we can help you draw a complete picture.
Really?
Sure. Fidelity and non-Fidelity accounts, IRAs, 401k, stocks, mutual funds, even the effects of taxes.
How do we start?
We'll meet in person or over the phone.
That's great. Let's get rolling.
For a free review of your portfolio, call 1-800-FIDELITY.
Despite government warnings of more terrorism, our nation remains strong. We'll show you how Americans are trying to balance anxiety and living normal lives. Join Paul Azad, 7 a.m. Eastern. You can depend on CNN tomorrow.
The sell-off on Wall Street, as we've reported to you, a second day in a row. Today's decline sparked by a poor consumer confidence report. But First Albany's Hugh Johnson says investors should have expected this weak report, and he predicts the next look at consumer confidence could be even worse. Hugh, with that, let me say welcome. And
thank you.
These consumer confidence reports, no one expected it to be quite this severe. What does it portend for us?
Well, it tells you a lot about what's going to happen to consumer spending. They're very forward-looking.
particularly consumer spending, not only in the fourth quarter, but maybe even a little bit beyond the fourth quarter? And the answer is that the numbers are telling you that consumer spending is probably going to be a negative number in the fourth quarter, that consumer spending is going to slow in the fourth quarter, maybe as we move into the first quarter. That's obviously not a very positive thing to say about the economy as we look forward.
Now we have a number of reports. We're going to get our first look at GDP for the third quarter tomorrow. We're going to have unemployment. These numbers are not expected to be particularly attractive or reassuring. We also have the Fed coming up next week. What is your take on the impact of those numbers on the investor and the investor's confidence, and whether the Fed will further cut rates?
Well, I think those numbers are going to be weak, as you suggested. The employment numbers particularly, you're likely to see a drop in non-farm payroll employment of 300,000 jobs. That's a big job loss. The Fed has got to respond to that, so I'm inclined to believe they're going to reduce short-term interest rates at their November 6th meeting by 0.25%. That's going to add a little stimulus to the pipeline that already is packed full of stimulus. As you know, the Fed has really hit the throttle very, very hard. So hopefully in time, and time I hope means first quarter, second quarter of next year, we'll see the economy start to recover and earnings start to recover. That's my hope anyway.
Your best counsel for investors tonight?
Well, you still have to play it a little bit on the guarded side. We don't have confirmation from the stock market yet that recovery in the economy and earnings is coming. So play it a little bit on the safer side. Hopefully sometime we'll be able to see brighter skies ahead, and we'll be able to say you can increase your allocation to the equity markets and start to move to the bull market sectors like technology and consumer cyclicals. But right now, play it a little bit on the safe side.
Okay. Hugh Johnson, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Coming up next, we'll tell you about a bright spot within the suffering travel industry. One segment holding on despite a major tourism slowdown. And we'll have some of your thoughts next. Reaction in particular to the post office's handling of the anthrax attacks. Moneyline will be right back.
You need a car to get the most out of life, but banks won't finance you if you have bad credit or no credit at all. Get the car you need and deserve. Call 1-800-BAR-NONE right now.
A respected newsman with a different way of looking at the story. Aaron Brown. Another reason why you can depend on CNN.
All across this great nation, people are working together to get America back on the road. At Town & Country dealerships, we're doing our part by cutting prices during our red, white, and blue sale. You'll find deep discounts on all makes and models. Combine this with 0% financing from most manufacturers, and there's never been a better time to buy. 6 different locations, 12 makes to choose from, and thousands of cars in stock. All united under one name, Town & Country. Town & Country dealerships. Drive home happy.
Good news from the world of science. Tests prove that clothes washed after 8 p.m. get just as clean as clothes washed before. Stay tuned for our findings on dishes.
Using electricity at night eases the pressure on the power system. So wait until 8. Portland General Electric. We all have the power to help.
Do you know who the #1 mattress manufacturer in the nation is? How about their #1 dealer in the area? The answer is Sealy and Mattress World. So we've joined forces to give you some of the best prices of the season. Right now you can save 30% on the best mattresses in the world. If you compare price, quality, and service, you'll buy from Mattress World. It's not too late to sleep like a baby. Mattress World off I-205, exit 12, 8 blocks north of Clackamas Fred Meyer, where low overhead means low prices.
Are you ready for Trib Football Fridays presented by U.S. Bank? All the best Portland Region High School football teams will be here. Head-to-head action coming to you live every Friday night at 8 from PGE Park. This week, the Lincoln Cardinals take on the Franklin Quakers for the PIL Championship. See it live on AT&T TV 26 or catch the replays Saturday morning at 9 and Saturday and Tuesday evenings at 8. A special sports presentation of AT&T Broadband brought to you by Les Schwab Tires and the Ringside.
Strikes Back. Depend on CNN.
One segment of the travel industry has managed to remain strong in a slowdown. Casey Wyan now takes a look at the boost in business for motels.
They
They may not have room service or health clubs, but these days motels do have plenty of business. This Southern California Red Roof Inn had an average occupancy rate of 85% for the week ended October 20th. A year earlier, it was only 2/3 full.
Good morning. Thank you for calling Town Place Suites Anaheim.
Campbell Motel Properties owns 27 motels in the West and Southwest. Despite an overall slump in the travel industry, its occupancy and room rates are almost unchanged from last year. Campbell's properties are in the economy or limited service category, catering largely to motorists.
Our part of the industry, I think, is in the right price range. And I think that has had a great effect upon it. And I assume that because some people now, instead of flying to their location and destination, are traveling in their car, and therefore they're using facilities like ours to spend the evening.
Nationwide, revenue per available room remains down sharply throughout the lodging industry, but luxury hotels have been hit hardest, down nearly 30% in mid-October, while limited service and economy motels are off only about 10%.
We have corporate managers at companies telling their employees, if you're too afraid to travel on business, you don't have to. And we also have a lot of companies rethinking what their profit outlooks are going to be for 2002, and I expect companies to continue to pare back their travel spending for 2002 as well as a result of that.
Which could make low-price, no-frills rooms more attractive to corporate travel managers. An added boost for the motel industry, gas prices have declined for 6 consecutive weeks and are now about 60 cents a gallon below where they were in May. That's providing more incentive for people to travel by car. Casey Wine, CNN Financial News, Anaheim, California.
Coming up next here, we'll take a look at your thoughts and a look at what to expect tomorrow.
Ahead of the Curve is brought to you by Lexus, the passionate pursuit of perfection. Stay ahead of the market and the competition. Log on to cnn.com/moneyline.
They say the new car has powers magical. They say once you sit inside, you turn into a different person. In this car, I wish to ride.
The all-new Lexus ES 300, a new world of luxury. At your Lexus dealer.
Get ready for the album event of the year.
And let the good times roll.
Playing with my friends, Bennett Sings the Blues.
Good times roll.
This one-of-a-kind blues experience includes the legendary Tony Bennett singing duets with music's biggest stars, including Ray Charles, Natalie Cole, Sheryl Crow, Billy Joel, B.B. King, Diana Krall, Katie Lang, Bonnie Raitt, K-Star, and Stevie Wonder.
I'm in a New York state of mind. Every day I have.
Call now to order the new album from Tony Bennett, Playing with My Friends, Bennett Sings the Blues, and receive a free Tony Bennett poster. Don't miss out on the album event of the year.
Playing with my friends. We'll have a good time.
Call the number on your screen to order Tony Bennett's Playing with My Friends and receive a free Tony Bennett poster with your order. Call now.
On September 11th, our world changed. Now, as events unfold, CNN is there. From Middle America to the Middle East. With 43 bureaus, CNN is the world's #1 news source. CNN connects you to the world and to a world of information. From the U.S. and overseas, CNN's team of over 300 dedicated journalists report on the issues that impact our lives. Political strategy, financial security, personal safety. With unparalleled perspective, we are CNN, and we are here. Now more than ever, you can depend on CNN.
Well, taking a look at tomorrow, we'll have our first look at third quarter GDP. Economists expecting the advance report on GDP growth to show a decline of 1%. And we'll also have quarterly earnings reports from Tommy Hilfiger, Sara Lee, and Quest Communications, amongst others. And tomorrow night here on Moneyline, Our special guest will be Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric. I love to say that as if no one knows that he's the former CEO of General Electric, so we're looking forward to that. Time now to look at some of your thoughts. We had a lot of comments on our interview last night with Deputy Postmaster General John Nolan and a frank exchange that he and I had over what the Postal Service is doing to protect its employees. I asked if the Postal Service shouldn't shut down some of those facilities until they can all be screened.
I've used the line that if you had a traffic accident in Seattle, you wouldn't shut down the highway system in Florida. What
well,
you've got to do is
hardly a traffic accident, Mr. Postmaster General. I mean, I think that analogy, they always limp. That one is certainly in the category of limping.
Well,